Hello and welcome to York University.
Hello and welcome to York Universe, the astronomy and astrophysics program written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. I'm Sana, I'll be one of your hosts this evening, and I'm joined by Parisa. Hi, Parisa.
Hi, Sana. Glad to
We're
be here
broad
today.
Glad to have you. We're broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory located at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. York Universe broadcasts every Monday night at 9 p.m. local Toronto time or Tuesday morning, 2 a.m. Universal time when Toronto is in EST. The York Universe production works in concert with our online public viewing program run by the Observatory team, which also runs between the hours of 9 to 10 p.m. local Toronto time. If you happen to be listening to us anywhere but on our YouTube channel, please go to our website, yorku.ca/science/observatory, and follow the links to join the online public viewing chat and to look at some nice archival and potentially live images from our 1 meter telescope tonight. If you have any questions or comments on any of our past shows or suggestions for future topics, you can also contact us at observe@yorku.ca or connect with us on Instagram with the handle @yorku_observatory and on Facebook at Allan I. Carswell Obs. All of our programs are free, but if you would like to make a donation, please see our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory. So the weather is actually looking pretty decent at York right now, and fingers crossed Daniel and Cam will be able to get the 1 meter on sky soon to provide some nice live images for us. But Parisa, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. I just came back from Star Festival in the previous weekend, and it was amazing. So I'm gonna talk about it, I think, a lot in this episode. So yeah,
Mhm.
no, I'm fresh, and Kingston is pretty clear tonight as well. So yeah, happy to be here. How are you?
Nice. Oh, I'm good. I'm looking forward to hearing about Starfest. So we'll, I guess, skip talking about Starfest now, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I've never been myself, but definitely sounds like something I would enjoy. But yeah, I'm pretty good. We've had actually some decent luck with the weather recently, a couple clear nights. Looking like there was going to be a couple more clear nights this week. So I guess for once the weather is cooperating with us.
Oh yeah, it is always weather dependent. Like you never know
Mhm.
until you're about to observe something and you're just like hopeful and then finger crossed and then just willing to have a clear sky.
Hmm. Yeah, I know how frustrating it can be, looking forward to observing and getting there and setting up, and then all of a sudden, it's cloudy out of nowhere, so we can't observe. But got to just grab the clear skies whenever they actually happen.
Oh yeah, I just remember in the weekend that I was just like driving from Kingston to Starfest. I just like passes through storms and I was like, at some point I lost my
Oh,
hope. But it was funny because like during the day and it was so cloudy, we had a couple of rain, but we just were very, very lucky that both nights got really clear and then we made the most out of it. So I'm so, so happy out of this experience.
oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I would have definitely been worried if I have to, travel somewhere to observe, and then I would be checking the forecast constantly.
Yeah, I did like for 5 hours and half of the traffic of the GTA area. Yeah, I
Mm,
would have been so sad if it was cloudy.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, we will talk more about Starfest in a little bit, but we should get started with our This Week in Space and Astronomy history. I'm first up tonight, August 12th, so exactly today, actually, August 12th, 1977, which is the first free flight of the Space Shuttle Enterprise. Now, NASA made six of these space shuttles, which was one of the programs that they were focusing on a lot after the end of the Apollo era, really to just kind of establish a more sustained human presence in space. And eventually, this ended up turning into the International Space Station. So the has been incredibly successful for a very long time. All of this kind of needed things like the space shuttle to actually be able to operate and be launched into space successfully. So a space shuttle program came up with this really awesome idea for the way for rockets and ways to get humans into space and then back to the Earth safely, which is that you would launch the space shuttle like a normal rocket. You just stick it on the side of a rocket and launch it into space pretty much vertically. But then instead of splashing down in the ocean or in a desert somewhere, the space shuttles could actually land and fly through our atmosphere like normal planes. So I actually really love this idea the more I think about what the space shuttle is and kind of the design in contrast to the capsules that are more commonly used right now. It's a really awesome idea. In total, NASA made six space shuttles, like I had just said. And one of them, the very first space shuttle, is called Space Shuttle Enterprise, which was ultimately a test, essentially a test bed for later shuttle missions. Enterprise itself never actually flew in space. It was designed specifically just as like a test aircraft so that NASA engineers could learn more about the way that the space shuttle would handle in the atmosphere and how it would land, and basically just learn a whole bunch of important things that they could later apply to the space shuttle missions that actually would fly in space. So while the overall design of Space Shuttle Enterprise was similar to a lot of the later space shuttle designs, it also lacked a lot of important equipment that the later space shuttles had. So things like the fuselage and thermal protection systems aboard Space Shuttle Enterprise were different just because it didn't actually have to be exposed to the vacuum of space and re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And it was also missing a lot of equipment, including things like radars, and most importantly, in this case, main engines. Space Shuttle Enterprise actually never had the main engines that the later space shuttles had to be able to actually navigate and fly around. So this thing was essentially just like a really big glider in a way, where it was not actually capable of powered flight by itself, and it needed something else, a shuttle carrier aircraft, as NASA called it, to actually be able to get it to a higher altitude and start to fly. So earlier on in the testing of Space Shuttle Enterprise in September 1967, it had a few what are called captive flights, where it was attached to the top of the shuttle carrier aircraft. This was a highly modified Boeing 747, which could literally fly with the space shuttle attached to the top of it. So it would take off like it normally would and then fly around with the space shuttle on top of it, which is really, really cool. In my opinion, the pictures and the videos of those flights are really kind of insane, thinking about how massive Space Shuttle Enterprise is, literally just attached onto the top of an entire other massive spacecraft. It's pretty awesome. And then on August 12th, 1977, it finally did its first free flight, where it would take off attached to the shuttle carrier aircraft as usual. And then once it got to an altitude of around 20,000 feet, the pair would detach from each other. The shuttle carrier aircraft would just sort of fly out of the way. And then the Space Shuttle Enterprise itself would do a little flight through the Earth's atmosphere and then land like aircraft would. But again, this happened with no engines on board. So it was completely unpowered flight, and it was largely just kind of a glider that was gliding through the air to land. So this is definitely kind of a risky and very difficult thing to be able to do. But the astronauts who were on board flying Space Shuttle Enterprise for its first free flight were very experienced. They included astronauts Gordon Fullerton, who would go on to fly 2 space shuttle missions to space, and astronaut Fred Hayes, who was actually the lunar module pilot on the Apollo 13 mission, which was NASA's sort of successful failure of the Apollo program. They had a massive explosion on board one of the modules for the Apollo 13 spacecraft while it was in space, which completely crippled the spacecraft. It prevented them from landing on the moon, and it was really challenging to actually get the astronauts back to Earth safely. But it definitely gave him a lot of experience in how to fly a spacecraft. in dangerous situations, which I guess was perfect for this first free flight of Space Shuttle Enterprise. So the space shuttle lifted off on top of the shuttle carrier aircraft in front of a crowd of 65,000 people, then detached at 20,000 feet altitude, and eventually just glided down to landing, which was a very successful first free flight for Space Shuttle Enterprise. Enterprise ended up doing 4 more of these free flights, which really just helped to test out different aspects of the spacecraft and just give NASA engineers data that they needed to be able to successfully create later generations of the space shuttle that would eventually fly in space. Currently, Space Shuttle Enterprise is on display at the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in New York City. I definitely recommend going to visit Space Shuttle Enterprise at Intrepid. I went there last year. It was really cool, awesome to be able to see this massive space shuttle like right in front of you. And Intrepid is a really cool place in general. So if you have some time to go there, I definitely recommend it. But before being brought to Intrepid Air and Space Museum, it also ended up at a couple of different locations in different museums. And it was also used as part of the investigation into the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster in 2003. So it was actually used a couple of more times before ending up in its current place in Intrepid Air and Space Museum. But one other interesting thing I do want to mention about Space Shuttle Enterprise is that it was not called Space Shuttle Enterprise. At first, when it was finished, completed, and introduced to the public, it was called Space Shuttle Constitution, which is just, I don't know, it's a very American sounding name, I think. So it kind of makes sense that they went with Constitution initially. But fans of the show Star Trek ended up doing this mass letter writing campaign to both NASA and US President at the time, Gerald Ford, and convinced them to rename Space Shuttle Constitution to Space Shuttle Enterprise after Star Trek, which I think is a even cooler name than Constitution. So I'm definitely glad it worked out that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, usually astronomers are having like, a terrible choice of choose of like names. I don't know. I always like, support running campaigns for choosing a better name for a spacecraft and astronomical projects usually. I don't know why we're not really creative, but yeah.
Yeah, I
So
know it's like comically bad how bad some of these names can be for
yeah, oh my
astronomers come
God.
up with. Yeah.
Exactly. Constitution. I'm like, oh man, no.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of like the earlier days of NASA, there were a lot more um now NASA has a lot of scientists that work there, but in the kind of earlier days there were definitely a lot of military personnel and like people who had flown as test pilots who were involved in NASA. So I guess if you had a higher fraction of people who had like worked in the military who were involved in the projects, that's how they would come up with the name Constitution. But Enterprise is better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even though like nowadays I do not trust like astronomers fully themselves, and I'm like running campaign for like, to invite public to come up with a better name, always is supported.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but thank you, Sana. That was a great kind of like astronomy history updates and like, the spacecraft and all this amazing technical engineering stuff. But for tonight, I just picked to kind of touch on some very popular astronomical events, which everybody like might have known about it, which is like a Perseid meteor shower. And
Mhm.
Perseid, and which I love August because of that, because I think I generally found August one of those summer, like 1 month of the summer, which is still very warm and is very rich in astronomical events. So there's so many things happening in August usually, which one of the
Mhm.
like the most famous one is like a Perseid meteor shower. So have you ever like went to go specifically stargazing for Perseid meteor shower sauna or not?
I did once a few years ago, but I've never really been able to get to a dark sky location. So it's mainly just I've been observing in like the park near my house. And sometimes that's like semi-successful for meteor showers, but it's still kind of bright there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
guessing, I'm guessing you have observed the Perseids before, though.
Oh, yes, actually,
Ah,
the same as you. I think this year was the first year as I actually went to the Starburst particularly, which I'm going to talk about it more later on in this episode for Perseid meteor shower. But one thing which is really fascinating about that meteor shower is just like it is so strong that if you're not even at the like the most darkest area, you still be able to spot some of them, and that is really really nice about this. But
mm,
Perseid meteor shower is also it's one of the most like popular meteor shower because I think one of the reason is definitely will be because it is in the summertime. So people can camp and then just go for stargazing, will not really, just be concerned about the cold, especially here in Canada. And it happens every August and it lights up like the night sky with the hundreds of the shooting stars. So if you're like looking at that Perseus constellation, which is the name actually comes from the Perseus constellation, because if you're looking at the sky, it kind of looks like that it comes from that constellation, but it has nothing to do. So that's why they call it the Perseid meteor shower. And then you should be able to spot basically more than like I don't know, more than 10 or 20 per hour. Or maybe I think more, like 100. I don't know. Like I think I'm just really mess up with those numbers, but they're very strong and they're very, very bright. And it is like kind of like different from all those meteor that you might, catch some when you go generate for stargazing. These are really, really spectacular. But yeah, to a little bit just talk about its history. It's actually these meteors coming from tiny bits of like the dust and debris from a comet called Swift-Tuttle, which orbits the sun every 133 years. And when the Earth passes through the trail of this comet, these very teeny tiny dust grains, like basically mostly, they're not bigger than even like a grain of the sand. They hit the atmosphere of the Earth at very, very high speed, up to 60 kilometer per second. And as they speed through the atmosphere, they heat up and burn. And that creates a bright streaks of light that we call those meteor. And this Perseid meteor shower have been it's not a new event because people even spotted like human beings spotted over like 2,000 years, which it was also very it was like a very nice like amazing fun fact to me that even like Asian civilization like Chinese or Middle Eastern or even like Egyptians or Western culture, like every all those Asian civilization kind of like called on that meteor shower and reported on their documents somehow, and which was like one of the most, I don't know, famous ones that we know. And it actually comes in a different colors. So, Sana, do you also spot some colors when you saw some meteors or not?
I've never really been able to spot the colors. So I don't think I've seen one that's particularly bright enough. And the area I live in does have a lot of light pollution, so even on like the really extreme meteor showers, I don't get tons of them. But I do know that they do have different colors.
Yeah, that is one thing. If you actually just go into very, very dark spot, and then if the meteor is strong enough, you can actually kind of can tell the very shade of that color. So if I'm saying
Mm.
like, it's like yellow or blue or red, it's not really that sharp, but it's kind of like, like as you looking at the, for example, Mars, it's kind of like reddish. You can tell it. That's how they
Hmm.
look like. And which I saw a couple of them on that night in the previous weekend. And then actually the peak is tonight. It's August 12th is the peak of that meteor shower. And I saw I think two of them. One was like kind of like greenish and one reddish, which I also have I detected some of them on my like astrophotography, and I was so happy that I actually just some of
Oh.
them showed up. Oh my God, they were amazing. So I'm definitely gonna just edit them and then post it somewhere, which are
Hmm.
really great because like you never like know if you're lucky enough to just like get some in your shot, because if you're not particularly I don't know, pointing towards like the Perseus, you never know. which
Yeah,
was
it's definitely hard to get like pictures of meteors.
yeah, exactly. That is, one of my goals to actually learn how to do photography of the meteors, but I don't know. It's a little bit hard. You need a very long exposure time. You need to let your camera to scan the nights for for the full night, and then try to making that image precisely, because as I know, like some of those beautiful, astrophotography that you see on Instagram, these people really need to, correct for the position as well, to make sure that, they kind of, because as you photography, like, and then the night sky kind of rotate around yourself, like, I mean, above the stars are like, rise and set, and then you have to also
Hmm.
like adjust for the position as well to make that photo accurate. So yeah, so coming from different colors. So back to those meteor, they can come in yellow or goldy ish, or blue or green, or a spectrum of red. And each of those colors actually represents the chemical composition of those meteors. And the colors usually indicates what are those meteor are made of. For example, yellow and gold means that meteor contains iron. Blue or green means the colors coming from magnesium in those meteors, and red represents the high presence of nitrogen and oxygen in the Earth atmosphere interacting with those meteor. And each of those color is kind of like a fingerprint, and give us a clues about what are those meteor made of. But you might ask, where those hydrogen or magnesium or iron come from? And we all know that these kind of elements form in the core of the stars, which stars made mostly made of, like, 99% of like the stars made of out of hydrogen. And then in the core we have those nuclear reaction that the hydrogen burns and making the elements. And as the stars die, which they actually deposit all those materials into space. So, and it kind of like acts like a loop, that all those materials come together, wandering in the sky, I mean the space. Then I don't know, a wind or some conditions will happen that they come together and actually build a new generation of stars. So all those materials kind of like floating in the space all the time, and we have a generation and generation of the stars. For example, these elements, like heavier elements, are kind of like remnant of the previous generation of stars that they've been formed and died, and then they deposited all those materials into space. And then the composition of the comet of the Swift Tuttle, which is the origin of this Perseid meteor shower, is also believed to have formed from the same material that created our planet. So it's from our solar system. So the same material that made moons and other bodies of our solar system about 4.6 billion years ago. And like all the other comets, it's made up of ice, dust, and rocky materials. And these heavy elements, as I said, are coming from a previous dead star, which these materials have been formed in them. And comets are always like, described as a dirty snowballs, because they consist of mix of frozen gases and water ice and embedded dust particles. And this comet, Swift Tuttle, comes from the outer region of our solar system, especially a region called the Kuiper Belt that you might have been familiar with, which lies beyond the orbit of Neptune. And then the Kuiper Belt is filled with the icy bodies remnant from the early solar system. So kind of like, it kind of like, the leftovers of all those materials that they were not big enough to actually their gravity win, and then they become a planet. So they come of like, a failure of being a planet, and they just like ended up being comet, which I just like found it very nice. So we have that belt in a very outer region of the solar system, that we have a lot of them. And then so Tuttle comes from that belt also. And so yeah, occasionally the gravitational attraction sends some of these objects closer to the sun, And so they become active comets, which sometimes the debris in their tail, as we pass through it, they just falls into our atmosphere and then making this shower, kind of like a meteor shower. And this sweep total has a highly elliptical orbit also, meaning it travels far out into the solar system before swinging back close to the sun. And its orbit takes it out past Pluto. So, and that's why it takes about 133 years to complete one orbit around the sun. When it gets close to the sun, the heat causes the comet's icy surface to sublimate, which goes from like the solid to gas, and releasing dust and gas and forming the bright like the coma and tail that we associated with the comets. So, and then when to watch tonight and tomorrow, I think it will be the peak, and it always happening in the August, which is that makes August very special also. And also, if you traveling on August 12th by plane, you might also be able to catch it from airplane as well, which I think I saw some photography out of them, which some people like, take a shot from the plane, and they were like so cool. And yeah, so enjoy yeah, okay, that's where I just wrote this number, that you can see up to 100 meteor per hour on the peak, which is August 12 or 13. And the reason that why it is so special, because as we mentioned, they're so fast and bright, and they're often one of the most plentiful showers of the year. And usually it is one of those favorite for sky watchers because it occurs in the warm summer months, making this perfect excuse to lay back, relax, and watch the skylight up to the nature's fireworks. So yeah, so if you can just drive a little bit far from the city, or if you're living in the area which you have amazing I don't know, kind of relatively darker night sky, so grab a blanket, yeah, and then save yourself a spot out there and enjoy a meteor shower.
Yeah, tonight would be a perfect night to watch, or like skies are clear around here. The temperature is also really nice tonight. So this would definitely be one of the great nights to. But I don't know. I had the Perseus events. It was a lot of fun, really, just sort of chilling and hanging out outside. You don't really need anything, right? It's so nice because you can just get together with friends and just lay around and watch the meteor shower.
Oh, absolutely. Like I remember last year, we were just like hanging out, even like in downtown Kingston. Kingston is not really bad. It's not like Toronto, but I mean, in terms of light pollution, but we were just hanging out downtown, so not really a relatively dark spot, but we could just catch some of them even if when we had like full moon last year. So this is
Mhm.
very bright. So yeah, so wherever you are, just go out and then looking at the sky, you might be able to like to just catch some. So yeah, highly recommended. It's very interesting, and then you can make a lot of wish and hope that they're gonna come true.
Yeah, wish for more clear skies.
Yeah, that is a dream of astronomers. That's why I'm
Yeah,
doing radio astronomy. I don't need a good weather to be worried about.
I'm definitely jealous. It would be nice if we could do radio astronomy, and just not have to worry too much about the weather.
Yeah, exactly. Just because of that reason, I might not. I mean, I love optical telescope, but maybe I'm gonna just use them for fun.
Yeah. Well, using optical telescopes for fun is also awesome.
Oh yeah,
So, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, so do you want to tell us a little bit more about like the other astronomical history of the year?
Yeah, yeah. So, we have been talking a lot about the sun recently. So this is a perfect this week in astronomy history to continue talking about the sun once again. So this is going to be August 16th, 1989, which is when the sun actually shut down Toronto's stock market for 3 hours. Now, this happened as part of what's called Solar Cycle 22, which is the 22nd solar cycle that has been recorded since solar cycles were being recorded and observed beginning in 1755. Solar cycles are these 11-year periods where the solar activity moves from minimum to maximum and back to minimum again, where every near solar maximum, so the peak activity on the sun, the direction of the poles of the sun's magnetic field actually do a 180 and just flip orientation. And this flipping of the poles is a little bit of a mystery as to why this happens, but it does lead to some pretty cool activity. In that near solar maximum, you have a whole bunch of stuff happening on the sun. The magnetic field is really energetic, it's doing a lot of stuff. It is particularly doing things like creating sunspots. These are just areas on the sun which are cooler than the rest of the surface of the sun. So when we observe them, they just look like these little black spots on the sun's disk. It also comes along with things like coronal mass ejections, where the sun ejects a whole bunch of high energy charged particles out into space, and solar flares, which are actually kind of similar to CMEs, except instead of ejecting charged particles into space, it's ejecting high energy radiation into space. And these things can, do things like hit planets. They can hit the Earth and do things like cause the aurora borealis or the northern lights. You can even observe similar things like that on some of the outer planets in the solar system, like Jupiter. Any planet that has a strong magnetic field will be able to observe these really cool aurorae that we have been getting a little bit recently because we are approaching solar maximum in solar cycle. I'm not sure what solar cycle we're in right now, but anyways, we are approaching solar maximum, so we are getting a lot of these kind of aurorae and things. But on top of that, the sun can also cause some problems and cause some damage when it's approaching solar maximum. Because these things are such high energy events, it can actually interfere with electrical systems and stuff that we have and rely on so much on the Earth. So going back to 1989, in around the summer of 1989, the sun was having a fit. It was, throwing a whole whack of stuff out into space as part of the solar maximum. In particular, there were a couple of major events during this 1989 solar maximum, which had included very, very strong aurorae that could be seen all the way as far south as Texas in some cases, which is pretty wild considering how far south Texas is.
Wow, I
And
cannot
yeah,
believe it.
that
Imagine
would
like
have,
imagine like you see like aurora from Texas, like oh my God. I think this year was kind of like really strong because like we got some even in Kingston. Yeah,
mhm,
you could clearly like see it, and then some people like spot like the colors even. But Texas, I was just like, oh my God.
mhm. Like, and imagine, you can see some aurorae in Texas. How awesome would it have been if you were like further north where you get aurorae usually? Like that would have been insane.
Exactly. And now I'm just like imagine. So yeah, and then we actually like saw a lot of sunspot with all those people having a solar uh filter for their telescope in the Starfest. Like the solar like spots were like so many that it was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some recent pictures of the sun. There's a whole whack of sunspots in there right now. Definitely a good time to be observing the sun. I know it was getting, I don't want to use the word boring, but it was getting a little boring observing the sun during solar minimum because you just looked at the disk and it was like nothing.
Oh, I see. Like, and then the worst thing that when you show like the publics that just like the sun and the minimum solar like, solar activities, they just like looking at the eyepiece and just like that was it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes. What else did you expect it to be? But yeah, that was always like a funny reaction from public that when you're looking at the sun without all those flares and spots and it's like, yeah, like a red, like I don't know, just like a kind of like yellowish, like I don't know, circle blob. And I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, solar maximum can be a little scary because of the effects it has on the Earth, but it's definitely awesome for observing. Um, But yeah, on top of the aurorae visible in Texas in 1989, there were also it also caused mass power outages in Quebec. They had like a 9 hour power outage in Quebec after some circuit breakers were tripped in their power grid because of induced currents from this geomagnetic storm that was caused by coronal mass ejections from the sun. So they were definitely having an interesting time in 1989 due to the sun. And
Wow,
then
imagine.
Toronto,
Yeah, and I kind of like imagine that would have been like one of those sci-fi movies that because of like the astronomical events, like we have like the power outage because just like, end of the universe is happening. It's kind of like funny to looking at it like that.
yeah, yeah, I can imagine people would have been very confused. Like, the weather is not terrible. Why are we getting power outages right now? Hopefully, they had clear skies because then at least they would have been able to have like really nice dark skies for a little bit during this power outage. Yeah, Toronto got hit with some problems on August 16th, 1989, when the sun released what's called an X20 cluster flare. So again, these are just really strong bursts of radiation that come from the sun due to activity in the sun's magnetic. Now, the flares are the strongest flares. They have a that is to the earthquakes, where B is the weakest, then C, then M, and then finally X class solar flares are the strongest. The strongest ever solar flare has ever been in 2003 with a class of 5, and then flare the 16th, 19 X20. This definitely ranks among one of the strongest solar flares. It ended problems for Toronto after it induced currents in microchips in these disk drives at the Toronto Stock Exchange. And all three of the disk drives and the backup disk drives just like sequentially failed because of this radiation coming from the sun inducing currents in the disk drives. This was a complete shock to everyone who had been working with the stock exchange, because they had what they thought was this like completely redundant system that just could not fail. Like, they literally had three backup drives to prevent any full failures, and yet all three of them failed just one after the other. So the stock market ended up being down for about 3 hours on August 16th, 1989, leading to that very interesting event for any Torontonians who were looking to use the stock exchange. And just because we are talking about the sun again, I do want to mention that we are getting some more activity from the sun, like today, tomorrow, and the day after. So basically through to Wednesday. There was a coronal mass ejection that arrived at the Earth overnight on the 11th, and also we're still getting a little bit of it today, which is leading to some pretty strong geomagnetic storms. We're going to continue to receive some of this coronal mass ejection into tomorrow, and we'll likely be getting more aurorae tomorrow, potentially even tonight, which this time around can reach as far south as around New York, Idaho. So if you are looking to, observe the Perseids, this is also another great thing that you can do at exactly the same time. You just have to go outside, try and get to as dark of a site as possible, and just try and see some of these potential aurora we might be getting tomorrow. So that's hopefully a couple good days of observing coming up.
But yeah, actually I see like some folks are like that they've been at the Starfest. They just posted some pictures of Aurora as well. And yeah, I was wondering like where are they?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're supposed to get a decent amount tomorrow night is the big one. Um, there are a couple of different apps that will like notify you when there's aurora sightings, but I think tomorrow is the best one. It's going to be happening. But so that's another great thing to look forward to if you're going to be trying to observe in the next few days. But now that you mentioned Starfest, that is the perfect segue into our next This Week in History item, where you're going to tell us more about Starfest.
Yeah, so actually it was my first time going to Starfest this year, but then I realized that Starfest in Canada is one of the the one of the biggest one of the top 10 biggest star festival in the world. which I didn't know about them. And Starfest in Canada is the largest annual amateur astronomy conference and star party, attracting literally hundreds of amateur astronomer or like any enthusiasts about astrophotography, usually from Ontario, because I think usually it happens Southern Ontario. And a lot of people come from the US, like a lot of provinces out there, which they can come. And it's been ranked among the top star parties in North America by Sky and Telescope magazine. And then besides Star Festival, there are a lot of star kind of party happening in USA, like a Grand Canyon Star Party, Texas Star Party, winter star party apparently in Canada. The biggest one will be Starfest. In the southern skies, there's one happening in Bolivia, a Southern Skies Party, that is the name. And also in Australia, Southern Pacific Star Party. There's a couple in like Europe, as I know in UK, there is Equinox Star Party, Kildare Star Camp, and Swiss Star Party, and Queensland Astrofest also in Australia. So actually, I never knew about that before, that there's a huge community out there, which all astrophotographer, amateur astronomers that kind of like organize this little parties. These were just like, the top 10, like one of those, like the biggest ones that I mentioned, but there are a lot of smaller ones happening every year, different timing of the year, which I know in September there will be another one very close to Kingston and Frontenac, that they call it Frontenac Star Party. I think that's such a thing. So I was amazed. Like I'm just like I'll just tell you about my own experience going there, as an astronomer, but I've never been to one of those big events that you just like go there, arrive there. They were like very organized, give you a lot of maps and guidelines and brochures about what's happening. Everybody were a name tag, which I loved it because you knew their name and where they're coming from. So that was kind of like easier to connect with people, just coming from the other part of the Canada or any other part of the US, and then you could just like ask them a question. And what I realized that like people were there so friendly and open. I mean, beside like every single time I've been alone, so I didn't go with my friends, and I actually appreciate that because that gave me opportunity to just go out there and then talking with people, and every single person you just like talking about and just like, hey, can I just looking through your telescope, or can you tell me a lot of tell me about the tips that you're doing astrophotography. People were like sharing a lot, and that's why I really appreciate it, because I was always like wondering, if you want to go to stargazing, where do you find those people? And actually that is the place. Like if you want to just like hanging out with the people having the same passion and learn a lot about them, is there. And then beside the whole community, that how amazing it was. Honestly, there were like the big sponsors like Skywatcher, Canada Telescope, like all those famous ones in Canada were also sponsored for the Star Festival. A lot of talk were happening, and amazing people. Also, a lot of faculties from Western University, York University, and a bunch of other important people came to talk about astronomy and what's happening in the sky, but also a lot of perfect talk for astrophotography, which I just sorry, my bad that I just blank all those amazing names. But if you just like Google Starfest 2024, it will be a lot. You can just like see all those information. So I highly recommend that. Just like, if you didn't know about that, just and if you're like really interested in night sky, just go for hopefully Starfest 2025, which I'm really planning to go there. But guess what happened to me, Sana? A surprise happened to me, and I never could have imagined would have been.
Oh no. What
Yeah,
happened?
no, oh my God. Like actually, I that was my first time. So I didn't have any gears with me, like I mean telescopes or any good lens. So I do a little bit of astrophotography, but I only had my camera, which I was just like, okay, I'm gonna like take some shots of Milky Way and maybe Star Trail. And I just like talk with a bunch of people that, yeah, hey, I'm first year PhD astronomy, a student in astronomy, and I do not have a telescope of my own. And there was an amazing woman. I just want to like mention her name, like Julie the Merchant, if she listened to us or if she's might be like, her that I'm talking about her right now. She was one of those astrophotographer that she told me actually during the last 35 years I always had I always like have come to Star Festival, and then we talked about it, chatted a little bit, and then it was like a kind of a merchant like a buffet that they opened in the afternoon that everybody were like selling their secondhanded stuff and giving away their gears, and it was like you could find literally everything. So Julie, that amazing woman, got a telescope from another person, another friend of her, for me, and then sell it to me only for $40.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's
And
amazing.
and I could not even believe it. They also gave me a perfect made scope. I forgot like what was it like? I think it was like 5 to 80 millimeters, something like that. But it was like one of those, the best brand of the scope ever. And that cost, I just learned that cost like around $100. And then they just like sell it to me for $5. So
Oh my gosh.
the whole community were just like working together to get me a telescope. And I'm like, am I living a dream right now? Like, what is happening? And there was like another guy out there just like, yes, I got those telescope, like literally as a gift. They just like sell this to me for $40 and just like, oh, you missed a diagonal. Do you want a diagonal? Like, I have one. And I'm like, oh my God. There was another guy which heard this story, and I'm like, oh, you might need a team, like a good mount or go to. Like Chris, I forgot his last name, but then just like, okay, I have one, and then uh, whoever does the astrophotography or dealing with the telescope, no, a good mount at least cost $800,000. And then he's just like, okay, maybe that's not a best one, but I'll sell it to you for 100.
Oh my God. Wow.
So I have the whole set of telescope right now for $140.
Oh my
I can
God. That is
I
awesome.
I cannot imagine that. I'm not saying like that might happen to everybody. So just like don't yell at me if you just go to Starfest and you do not get a whole telescope for free. But I'm just like saying like how supportive the community is, that they're really there to help you to support you whatever question you have. They really share their knowledge very, very, friendly, and they're really easy to approach, which I really appreciated because some of those people I saw them. I mean, they're amateur astronomers. They're not like doing astronomy as their career, most of them, but they're amazing photographers. So I think usually if you just like, walking in the astronomical conferences, if you ask like, a professional like expert astronomers, oh, like, I don't know, show me Sagittarius in the night sky, they might not know, but like these are amateur astronomers that navigate the night sky perfectly, and they're a great photographer to, that they treat them as a hobby. So for a person like me that I'm doing astronomy as my career, but also very interested in night sky, I could not appreciate this kind of events which is happening, and that was absolutely worth it for me to just, um spend a little bit of my saving to just rent a car, go there, and I'm like, oh my God, that paid off literally everything. So yeah, that was my story of Star Festival. So I just like came back home with a whole set of a telescope and learned a lot about that astrophotography. And people were there so friendly. So yeah, and then if you have a gear or if you do not have a gear, also go to those festival or star parties, because other people, have a lot of amazing telescope and they're always let you to looking through their telescope, or just look what they're looking at and enjoy their photography. And there was also a lot of competitions and prizes that all those amazing sponsor just handed off a lot of prizes like filters, a lot of piece of the telescopes, all the whole gears that everyone might need. I mean, those one who have those facilities or gears that they might need. And then they also handed a lot of refractor telescopes and I was just like shocked. And then the finest prizes of the night was like the full set of Skywatcher T mount. I don't know the details, but it cost like it worth around like more than $1,000. So yeah, and people won that, and there were so many. So I was just like literally shocked. So I think I believe more I don't know, like around 100 people like won something. And I was
Oh man.
amazing. Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna go again to Star Festival. So yeah, I think Star Festival, that was my first time actually know about them because the Rask of the Kingston advertised it to my supervisor, Sarah Sadavoy, and then she had their poster on her office door. So I just like got to know about that Star Festival. Yeah, just really this summer. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that I've never been to a star party before, so it's great to know that there's such a good community
Oh yes,
to
yes.
to I could definitely learn a lot doing astrophotography with my own place to learn more about how to do that and get like, the experts advice on how to do that.
Yeah,
Sounds like
exactly.
fun.
Oh, it is fun. And then one was like a little bit funny to me, because the majority of the Star Festival party were like relatively senior. But that makes sense because that is a very expensive hobby. So I remember like in one of those talks they mentioned, oh, get yourself a job and then be rich and then choose astrophotography.
Yeah,
And I'm
that sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh yes. And then you were like asking some people like, yeah, how much your gear costs, and they said, oh, like around like $35,000. And I'm like,
Huh.
okay, I get myself into a different program like with Kalani Park program, which York University also hosted, which I love about it. And I'm like, I can get to work with a lot of other telescopes. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that was my story of Starfest. Sorry if it was long, but it was very interesting this year, and we got to have a chance to have a very, very also clear sky. So everything went well, and I'm happy.
Yeah, that was great to hear about. I'm glad that Starfest, and this is really just making me go to Starfest even more. So maybe I'll check out next year. Um, but yeah, like getting close to really quick reminders before we move on to a couple of news items. Just a reminder for anybody who's in Toronto and would like to visit the observatory and do some observing. We are open this Wednesday on the atrium, so the Arboretum parking garage location, where we have our 40-centimeter telescope on the roof of the parking garage. So if you would like to come take a look through the 40-centimeter telescope and do some observing with some of our other telescopes out there, please pay us a visit on Wednesday. It is free to attend, but we do ask that you get tickets ahead of time just so we know how many people are going to be coming at any given time. So you could just visit our website, yorku.ca/science/observatory, to get our free tickets on Zephy if you would like to come by for our atrium tour on Wednesday. But you do have a fun news item for some more observing coming up this week. So yeah, take it away for our news items. Teresa, can you hear me? You're muted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear
Oh,
you
I'm so
now.
sorry because of the technical
That's all right.
problem. Yeah, so I was mentioning that on August 14th there is going to be a standout event, which is a close conjunction of the Mars and Jupiter. That's what like one of the reasons that I love August, because there's so many events happening and we can really enjoy it. And that conjunction means that actually the Mars and Jupiter are going to be very, very close, appearing very close together in the sky. And just below the Pleiades star cluster and near the bright star Aldebaran and in the Taurus constellation, we can see these planets will seem almost touch each other in the sky from our viewpoint on Earth. And they're usually separated by just about 20 arc minutes, which is about two-thirds the diameter of the full moon, which is going to be over 500 million kilometers. So they're not like I mean, from our point of view, they just like seem very close, but they actually have relatively large distance still from each other. And we still have the additional in this month, we have the lunar occultation of Saturn on August 21st, which the moon will pass in front of Saturn, temporarily obscuring it from our view. But what makes this event very special is that in this consultation, like the Saturn's largest moon, Titan, will also be visible alongside the planet. So we can see, the moon covered the Saturn, but we still can see the Titan. So that occultation will begin around 4:15 a.m. So maybe the timing is not like the most pleasing, but just right before the sunrise, we can see that. And also the conjunction of the Mars and Jupiter, also it's around like 5 a.m. local time in Southern Ontario here. And yeah, so August, it's one of those months which a lot of things happening in the night sky. And yeah, so it's a very rich astronomical events month, I think.
Yeah, this is awesome. There's so many things happening right now. And so many of them, yeah, you don't even need like equipment really to see a lot of this. The Perseids and the Aurorae, you just sort of sit back and watch and hope to see something. And also with Mars and Jupiter, I have noticed them in the early morning. They are getting a lot closer to each other, so it's interesting to just kind of watch them approach each other like that in the morning sky. So lots of really fun things happening, even if the timing for the Mars and Jupiter conjunction is really terrible.
Oh yeah, so
So
and
early in the
even
morning.
exactly. And then even if like, people have
All right, we do have one more really quick news item to talk about today, which is a bit of a sad note to end on, but the end of the NEOWISE mission. So this is the a NASA-run mission called the Near Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, or NEOWISE. It originally launched in December 2009 as the WISE telescope, the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, which was meant to survey the night sky using infrared wavelengths. It ended up ending that mission in 2011, and it ended up going into hibernation mode, until 2013, when NASA decided to start running a modified version of a mission for this telescope called NEOWISE, where instead of doing an all sky survey in the infrared for the sake of, general astronomy, galaxies, planets, stuff like that, it was now going to be specifically searching for near Earth objects. So things like comets and asteroids, particularly things that might be a danger to the Earth just because they're so big and coming so close to the Earth. So NEOWISE operated in this mode for a little over 10 years. It observed 3,000 near-Earth objects, 215 of which were newly discovered by NEOWISE. And it also discovered 25 new comets, including Comet NEOWISE, which was visible to, I think it was visible to the naked eye under dark skies in 2020. Parisa, did you see Comet NEOWISE in 2020?
Oh yes, and I actually was hanging out with a bunch of astrophotographers that we that would have been able to capture that, and I'm so yeah, it was amazing. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with my headphones, but I couldn't hear you for a second.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
said we captured the new rise, yeah, in 2020, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it was a really nice comet to see. I got it kind of on the tail end of its visibility period, and I just got pictures of it with my DSLR. It was a really nice thing to see. Um, but hence the name NEOWISE was because it was discovered by the NEOWISE mission from the WISE spacecraft. Now, despite all of the amazing discoveries made by the NEOWISE mission, it was shut down permanently on August 8th because it is now getting a little bit too close to the Earth's atmosphere to actually be able to make useful scientific observations. So it's going to spend probably the next few months drifting closer and closer and further into the Earth's atmosphere until it is expected to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere a little bit later this year. Despite the sad end to Neowise, it was definitely a successful NASA mission. It really was instrumental in the understanding of the near-Earth environment and the objects that exist near the Earth, and is also instrumental for planning the next generation near-Earth object telescope called the NEO Surveyor, which is now expected to launch in about 2027. So definitely looking forward to that and seeing the cool discoveries that come out of NEO Surveyor, which would not have been possible without the work done by the NEOWISE mission. But that is kind of good timing because we are almost out of time, but less than a minute left. So everyone, you have been listening to York Universe, the astronomy and astrophysics program written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York. The hosts this evening have been Parisa and myself, Sana. You can always connect with us on Instagram with the handle at YorkU Observatory and on Facebook at Allan I Carswell Obs. And you can also check out our website, yorku.ca/science/observatory for show notes, content updates, and contact info. Thanks for tuning into York Universe. Clear skies and have a good night.